The eyes of the world are on Washington, D.C. as the second day of the second Senate impeachment trial of Donald Trump enters the history books. So what's the rest of the world think about what's going on here in the U.S.? Turns out some of them are pretty horrified, and it's actually got nothing to do with Trump this time around. Friends, it's time for Hold the Line.
Some people think this trial is a contest of lawyers, or even worse, a competition between political parties. It's neither. It's a moment of truth for America.
A moment of truth for America. Welcome to Hold the Line. I'm Buck Sexton. A lot of moments of truth here on this show. That was lead impeachment manager, Democrat Congressman Jamie Raskin, letting you know this morning just how important this moment is for our nation, even though most people in the country really don't care. They're telling us it's time to search within ourselves, though, and take a good hard look at who we are and what we've become. That's what the Democrats are claiming. So just who are we, and what do we project to the rest of the world? I can tell you for sure it's got nothing to do with what's going on Capitol Hill this week. Nothing to do with arguments from impeachment managers or Trump's lawyers. It's largely a sideshow. Everyone's going to forget about that in a matter of days. No, what we as a nation have been projecting overseas recently is something far more consequential than this second meaningless impeachment fiasco. During the post-9/11 period known as the global war on terror, there were a handful of countries that were known to be the main exporters of jihadism, the radical Islamic belief that's at the heart of groups like Al-Qaeda. Radical Islamic terrorists were operating in dozens of countries, but some of them, like Pakistan and Iran, for example, were actively spreading their extremist ideology all over the world, supporting terror groups, terror cells, and just radicalizing people as far as they can. But at the top of that list was the super spreader of hardcore Islamic terrorist ideology, our supposed ally, Saudi Arabia. Well, it seems that the Western world is starting to figure out that America is the Saudi Arabia of wokeness. That's right, we are the ones in this country exporting cancel culture, wokeness, and all the left-wing insanity that is tearing us apart these days. Our college campuses have already infected the rest of American society with the ideological rot of identity politics, intersectionality, and political correctness. Now, those bad ideas are metastasizing around the globe. And at least some remaining outposts of Western civilization, France, for example, in a piece by the Daily Mail recently, realize that wokeness, if it takes hold, can ruin their societies too, maybe even faster because they're further along the socialist pathway. Quote, out-of-control woke leftism and cancel culture from the U.S. is a threat to France because it attacks the nation's heritage and identity, French politicians and intellectuals say. That's in the blaring Daily Mail headline. My fellow Americans, this should be a wake-up call. I mean, France is hardly a stranger to radical politics, quite the opposite. If anyone tries to make a Frenchman work a minute more than the 35 hours a week that they generally accept as a matter of law, or raises the price of croissant a few cents, armies of student demonstrators take to the streets. You could argue that protesting is France's national sport, going all the way back to 1789, and you can ask Marie Antoinette how that one turned out. But French intellectuals, elite institutions, politicians, even President Macron himself have been calling on their countrymen to reject the American wokeness that has been ravaging brains in this country and now in their country before it's too late. There's a particular fear of the rotten ideas from our campuses, in fact. The French Education Minister Jean-Michel Blanquer warned back in October of the need to wage battle against an intellectual matrix from American universities. That's a quote. BLM protests all over Europe in the aftermath of George Floyd's death in Minnesota were a strong indicator of how far and wide woke ideology has spread. Democrat social justice movements and memes are now global, and that means the divisive tactics and authoritarian impulses of the American left will undermine the foundations of liberal democracies from Austria to Australia if left unchecked. What some of our friends, our cousins across the pond or across the Atlantic are seeing is what's really going on here at home, And you sometimes have to take the view of outsiders to understand what's going on inside. Wokeness is a form of early stage totalitarianism. These are countries, in the case of France and other European states, where they have a recent history of totalitarianism that they had to fight against, they had to deal with. In some cases, they were overtaken by, and they know these early signs. Everyone has to mouth the preferred slogans like marionettes of the state. No dissent is allowed. Shut down all those who have hostile questions for those in power. Forget about speaking truth to power. The media does the bidding of those who call all the shots. What does that sound like? Where does that bring up some analogies in your mind? The French recognize that identity politics, as practiced in America, create hostility and volatility in modern societies like ours that are not held together by tribe or religion or skin color, but shared ideas, values, and history. Once those things are undermined at their very foundation, and that is explicitly what wokeness does. The social bonds needed to make a liberty-based, rule of law nation-state function properly and protect individual rights and freedom, that all falls apart. Look, there is no guarantee of victory, even if we choose to fight this battle and understand what the stakes are. I mean, when you've got the French, who have open socialists that take power, when you've got other European countries that are saying, hold on a second, the American Academy and campus's embrace of wokeness is terrifying to us because we understand what totalitarianism can actually do to a society. Maybe it's time that we all understand what's really happening here. The Democrat Party in America has a lust for power, and that makes it embrace woke authoritarianism and poisonous identity politics. That much is clear. They've already made this bargain. We know what side of it they're on. But when even our cousins in Paris recognize that America is heading for cultural dissolution if it continues down the wokeness path, it's long past time for those of us who still care about the American experiment to confront that destructive, dishonest, and insane idea of wokeness that the left has mainstreamed. The fight is now, friends. They are shutting down our ability to communicate. They are targeting us. They are isolating us. Just go and read Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. You'll see for yourself. They're playing it out to a T. And we can wait for them to get tired of this, which they won't, or we can understand what the stakes are. If it's too radical for the French, don't you think wokeness is too radical for the America that you and I know and love? I think that much is clear. All right, the second impeachment trial of former President Trump grinds on in the United States Senate. It was brutal today. I watched as much of it as I could stomach. But we'll have California Congressman Devin Nunes on to lay down the law on what's really happening here and the surveillance state and the authoritarianism of the left when we come back. Take me up on this recommendation right now. Visit doneforyoubuck.com. You can learn more about my friends at Done For You Real Estate there. If you haven't checked them out yet, let me make this easy for you. These guys have found a way to make real estate investing simple, and their system flat out works. It allows everyday Americans like you and me to finally own investment real estate without all the risk and difficulty of trying to start on your own. Where do you go? What do you invest in? Which home do you pick? I can't possibly tell you in this one commercial of 60 seconds how important it is you check these guys out. So how about this? If you visit doneforyoubuck.com, at the top of the page is a podcast interview I did with Done For You Real Estate. You can hear my experience with their company in my own words in detail, from picking where I'm going to invest, which house, getting the loan, getting the tenant, getting the management company, all of that, step by step. Visit doneforyoubuck.com, listen to the podcast interview, and give my friends a chance to show you what they can do for you at Done For You Real Estate. That's doneforyoubuck.com. One more time, doneforyoubuck.com.
With this trial, you will open up new and bigger wounds across the nation. For a great many Americans see this process for exactly what it is: a chance by a group of partisan politicians seeking to eliminate Donald Trump from the American political scene and seeking to disenfranchise 74 million plus American voters. This trial will tear this country apart, perhaps like we have only seen once before in our history.
So the slippery slope principle will have taken hold if we continue to go forward with what is happening today and scheduled to happen later this week.
Former President Trump's lawyers laying out their case during the first day of the impeachment trial there. We're on the second day, of course. The team failed to halt the conviction on constitutional grounds as the Senate voted 56-44 to proceed with the case. Opening arguments continued this afternoon, where House impeachment managers and Trump's defense team will have up to 16 hours each to present their cases. So what can we expect in the days to come? Let's bring in Republican California Congressman Devin Nunes to discuss. Congressman, thanks so much.
Hey, Buck, great to be with you.
What do you make of what you've seen so far in this impeachment trial and the whole process?
Well, it's been dark days for America for 5 years since our intelligence agencies were corrupted as far as late 2015, when they began effectively, for lack of a better definition, spying on the Republican Party. I know they'll say Carter Page or Trump or Manafort or whatever the hell it is. At the end of the day, this has been going on for 5 years. You had the first, so there was an impeachment. It's basically the continued coup. And I think what you're seeing now is essentially the grand finale of it all, where they want to get 67 votes, the left, because they don't want Donald Trump to be able to run again. Now, it's kind of interesting because, very seldom, I think only once or twice in U.S. history, has a president actually won, lost, and then come back and won again. So they're really afraid of Donald Trump. It's kind of interesting.
Do you have
that's the only possible reason they're impeaching him.
Are you concerned at all, Congressman, that some of your Senate colleagues on the GOP side that haven't already shown a willingness to vote for conviction here may actually end up voting to convict?
I highly, highly doubt it. Of course, I think that the president's lawyers need to do a very good job making the case here. And look, it shouldn't be very hard to prove. The fact of the matter is Donald Trump's own words don't show that he was trying to lead an insurrection. There's no hard evidence, right? There's no intelligence. And in fact, the intelligence shows both before there were several groups, the FBI knew about it. They opened up that information to the U.S. Congress. At the end of the day, Nancy Pelosi is effectively the mayor. So the Capitol Police wanted more security. The Sergeant of Arms wanted more security. I knew they needed more security, and I'm just the top Republican on the Intelligence Committee. I have no power. I found out that morning. For some reason, there was no fencing put in place. The military was offered to come in. That the request was for them to come in. Somebody killed that. Now, who could that possibly be? It has to be Speaker Pelosi. And so that should be, now we don't have the hard evidence of that because, of course, we can't put her or her staff on the stand. But when you match up the timelines, for example, that there were pipe bombs placed the night before, you match up that the intelligence was not followed on and through with proper security protocol put in place, that would be the normal protocol that Pelosi won't answer for. Those are the simple things. And plus, then you have the timing of the entire situation where Donald Trump is still speaking. I've had several constituents of people that I know say that they hadn't even reached the Capitol yet when half of this thing was already over. So the key is, and I'm not putting any doubt that the people who broke windows and broke into the Capitol need to be absolutely prosecuted. But the challenge we have here is that there's no ramifications for anyone that went after federal buildings, created new countries in a city like Seattle over the summer. You had all of these things that everybody knows about, I think, now that listens to your show at least. And that's the thing that the American people are very frustrated with, the 74.5 million people that voted for Donald Trump. They want to know, wait a second, we have no problem with everybody who broke into the Capitol getting busted, but what about all the other people? And now you have the future. I think now what they're turning to, kind of going full circle where I started, Buck, 5 years ago, the intelligence agencies were totally corrupted and used for political purposes. Now you have, and with this, we're just learning new information on this, but we're learning that now the FBI is going out and using unused before surveillance activities, using like Bank of America, for example, and going out and getting metadata, searching through all that to find the locations of Americans. If that happened with Bank of America and if it happened with other companies, we're barely at the beginning of the corruption and the degradation of the FBI and the leadership of the DOJ.
Congressman, I have to ask, I know you're on the House Intelligence Committee. Have you been briefed on any credible threats that would lead you to believe there's a need for the continued presence of thousands of U.S. troops in the U.S. Capitol through March?
Well, the quick answer is no. But the sad part is that I actually have been briefed. I sat through one of the first briefings that I've ever had. Look, you'll understand this, and it's important for your audience to know. The House Intelligence Committee, the ODNI, the Director of National Intelligence, that was all set up with great security at the time so that there were no domestic surveillance, zero, no involvement by people that work at the CIA, FBI on foreign issues. The only way that the House Intelligence Committee would typically get involved in something like this was if, in fact, there was some sort of nexus, like let's say that Al-Qaeda or Iran or China or somebody like that was involved. That's why we would be briefed. I actually sat through one of my first briefings on the new issue of domestic terrorism is supposedly the major threat. Congress has now brought that into our jurisdiction. The Democrats at least are trying to. We will see if the Director of National Intelligence and CIA and NSA and all these agencies and FBI want to play this game. And that's what I'm referring to. And when I refer to, we're at a dark place right now, because if we're going to start calling 75 million Americans that voted for Donald Trump domestic terrorists, we're going to start using the financial services sector, to cell phone companies, to big tech, to surveil Americans, find out their locations, feed that information to the FBI, then to the Department of Justice, so you can go bang on the doors of people. I think we're in a very, very dark place. We're in an unprecedented area for Congress to be essentially turning the intelligence agencies 5 years ago to now normalizing that in the legislative branch of government, so that it looks like it's okay that Republicans and Democrats are actually just have the ability to get into domestic spying on our political enemies.
Congressman Nunes, appreciate you sharing all this with us, and thanks for doing what you do. We'll have you back soon.
Hey, thanks a lot, Buck. Great to be with you.
President Biden is just the latest Democrat president to sing the siren song of green jobs, but are any of those jobs actually materializing? The truth about the green economy in tonight's Buck Brief. You never thought COVID could ever cost you your home, right? Might just do that, because cybercrime is up 75%, and by far the most serious cybercrime when it comes to your home is home title theft. That's right, cyber criminals, foreign and domestic, are now after our homes, and it's easier than you'd think. The title documents to our homes are online. That's just true. They're kept on servers. The thief can find your home's title, forge your signature on a quitclaim deed stating you sold your home to him. Then he takes out loans on your home and leaves you in debt. You won't know until late payment or eviction notices arrive, and insurance doesn't cover you, and neither do common identity theft programs out there. That's why I protect my home with Home Title Lock. The instant Home Title Lock detects someone tampering with my home's title, they help shut it down. Go to HometitleLock.com and register your address to see if you're already a victim of this crime and don't even know it yet. Use code RADIO to receive 30 free days of protection. That's code RADIO at HometitleLock.com. Again, code RADIO at HometitleLock.com.
The Keystone decision will cost 1,000 existing union jobs and 10,000 projected construction jobs.
Well, what Mr. Trump also indicated in the same interview was that President Biden has proposed a climate plan with transformative investments in infrastructure and laid out a plan that will not only create millions of good union jobs, but also help tackle the climate crisis. And as the president has indicated when he gave his primetime address to talk about the American Rescue Plan, he talked about his plans to also put forward a jobs plan in the weeks or months following. And he has every plan to do exactly that.
Yeah, sure, millions of jobs. Just going to come out of where exactly? That was an interesting and revealing exchange between Fox News' Peter Doocy and White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki. For years, we've heard the left parade around about how green jobs are the future. Millions will become employed in new and better fields. Right? But what do we actually get? Remember the Solyndra fiasco? Yeah, we got that. We have also gotten rising unemployment. They've cost jobs in fossil fuels that didn't have to be eliminated, higher energy costs, and all around more broken promises than answers. Traditional fossil fuel-based industries and jobs support millions of Americans, either directly or indirectly. But because some coastal elites find them icky and contemptible, they have to suffer in order to boost John Kerry's ego as he parties in Davos in between private jet flights when his yacht is being refueled. All 74 feet of it. Let's dive headfirst into all this pomposity and insanity on today's Buck Brief. Now, when you're a Democrat and even a big union guy decides that your Green New Deal lunacy is not a good idea, maybe it's time to take notice of that. But then again, a new administration like this one that is feeling like it's in charge of pretty much everything, the media is carrying all the water for Biden and company that they can, they are getting a little arrogant in all of this. But Richard Trumka, one of the biggest names in the unions out there, said this about Biden's canceling of the Keystone XL pipeline and the job losses it created. Play it.
The Labourers International Union of North America put out a statement saying that it's going to cost 1,000 union jobs. Can you explain why the president was right?
Well, I wish he hadn't done that on the first day, because the Labourers International was right. It did and will cost us jobs in the process. I wish he had paired that more carefully with the thing that he did second by saying, here's where we're creating jobs. We can do mine reclamation, we can fix leaks, and we can fix seeps and create hundreds of thousands of jobs in doing all of that stuff.
You think Biden realizes that that was a mistake, that announcement?
I think so, yes.
It was a mistake, wasn't it? Because how do you justify costing 1,000 jobs, really more like 11 or 12,000 in terms of the projected jobs that were directly related to building the Keystone XL pipeline, with the promise of there'll be some other green jobs in the future? Do they find those union guys who lost their jobs and directly take them to some Green New job, where or Green New Deal job somewhere else in the country? How does that work exactly? Who pays their mortgage? Who pays their rent while they're waiting for that Green New Deal job to kick in, those green energy jobs? Here's what the libs and the Democrats don't want you to focus on. For all the talk about renewable energy, it's still a pretty small piece of the overall pie here in America. You're looking at about 11% renewables. Of that, 23% wind, 21% hydroelectric, 1.8% geothermal, solar, about 9% of that 11%, mind you. This is all within that one slice. So it's about a tenth of overall energy in the United States. 90% of the energy that you are getting is coming from traditional fossil fuel sources. And the renewable energy market, they're telling us that this is going to grow dramatically under Biden. Millions of new jobs, right? That's the promise. Millions of new jobs. Well, if you look, 2002, 2006, 2010, every 4 years, renewables goes kind of maybe a point, down a point, up a point. I mean, that's it. You see the little green and yellow at the bottom of the screen there? You got renewables there. Not exactly game-changing stuff every 4 years, huh? Staying right about where it is. Because if this was such a great idea, the market would see it as an enormous opportunity and people would flood into it. But no, this is like central planning on steroids. That's what they really think is going to happen with the Green New Deal. They'll create enormous economic dislocations, cost a huge amount of jobs. How many jobs in the fossil fuel industry? Well, about 2 million people in the United States are employed in either oil and gas or coal or just all these different things you see on your screen here, and that even including gas stations. And remember that about half of petroleum usage in this country doesn't even go into cars, it doesn't go into transportation, it's in products. This stuff is necessary for things that you buy in the grocery store or at the drugstore, and you can't replace that with solar energy. So what the heck do they really think is going to happen here? But in a shorter term sense, we'll get into the climate change stuff more later, what's supposed to happen to people who lose their jobs? Oh, they listened to Jen Psaki drone on with the same talking points that the Democrats used for all of the Obama years too, about all these new green energy jobs that are going to pop up. Do they pay as much as a petroleum engineer? Will you make as much money, you think, if you are working in the green energy industry as an actual frontline person as you would in the fossil fuel industry? Unlikely, without massive government subsidies, but that's where this is all going to come together. They're planning to spend perhaps trillions of dollars of your money on what would be a great green leap forward, a massive effort to transform not just the American energy sector, but the American economy into something that the government controls through this Green New Deal rubric. Now, you think they won't be able to do this, and you're probably right, at least in the short term. This is the goal. And given the willingness that they've shown to go after it right away, they can do a lot of damage even if they don't manage to achieve everything they're looking to here. So we need to continue to point out that there's real suffering from this obsession with climate change and green energy that people feel today, and promising them a job in a year or 10 years or who knows when shouldn't cut it. Good news, we like that. The Biden administration wants to get American students back to school, but only sort of. We got more on that with the Federalist David Marcus right after the break.
When President Biden talked for the last couple months, particularly during the transition, about reopening schools within the first 100 days, why didn't he ever mention the small print that was just going to be for 1 day a week as the goal?
Well, again, the president set a goal of reopening the majority of schools within 100 days. And when you asked what that meant, I answered the question. So that is not the ceiling. That is the bar we're trying to leap over and exceed.
That was White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki trying to pretend that having 50% of American schools open for in-person learning 1 day a week qualifies somehow as reopening the schools. We expect many more low bars from this new Biden administration in the months to come when it comes to COVID. Sure seems the pledge for a return to normalcy was just another broken promise in a already fast-growing list. To delve into lockdowns, reopenings, and the impact this is having on society at large, I'm joined by the Federalist's New York correspondent, David Marcus. Mr. Marcus, good to see you.
Good to see you, man. So
they clearly were wrong about the schools closing, right? Because more even than the data, which is unequivocal. I mean, it's so clear that children are fine, they're not at risk from this, and they don't even really pass it to adults, so why are we not allowing kids to be in school? But but Catholic and private schools in New York, for example, have stayed open almost entirely, and they're fine. So the public schools shut down because the teachers' unions wanted to shut them down, and now the Biden administration is trying to sell us on this. Well, we're going to open for at least 1 day a week and call that open.
Yeah, I think one thing that's very telling about this is that we had a president in Donald Trump who really was not very beholden to many special interests. He really ran with small donors. He didn't have a long political history and a lot of favors that he owed. And Joe Biden's clearly exactly the opposite. And so it's quite obvious that the teachers' unions have his hands tied here. And it's a real shame because it's going to do a lot of harm to our kids. It already is.
And it seems to me that setting the bar so low in this way, there's a fundamental dishonesty to calling schools reopened and then establishing, and this is what they have already, that if they're open 1 day a week, and by the way, what does that even mean for how many teachers are even there? Are all the students there? Are they doing rotations? David, it just looks like they're going to play a lot of games here and pander to every whim of the teachers' unions, even while pretending that an agreement has been reached that puts the kids first, because they haven't been putting the kids first all along.
No, and if they're there 1 day a week, like my kid's in 2 days a week here in New York, right? But it's still with the computer, and there's still half the class that's remote. So it's still not the real in-person learning experience. It's something entirely different that he and his classmates and his mom and I find enormously frustrating. We have to get this done. And you're right. It's an absolute joke, this idea of 1 day a week. How are parents going to go to work? I mean, this doesn't fix anything.
Well, that's what I mean. Well, what's even the point? In what universe is 1 day a week of in-person learning? What does that even do? I mean, well, you're going to have 20% real school for the last, by the way, 2 months of the year. I mean, tell me this. Had they set up a program to extend the whole school year through the summer for kids once they reopen this? I mean, that would at least make some sense.
I mean, I've heard talk about the idea that I think I saw Randy Weingarten address this question, the head of the teachers union. But again, I mean, that would just be more negotiations with the unions. I mean, the unions are clearly making the decisions here, not Joe Biden.
And what do you think the unions? What do the unions want, David? What do they really want? Because I know Randy Weingarten. I've interviewed her many times. Her thing is teachers just want to teach. That's always her line. Whatever which is nonsense, by the way. What do you think the unions really want?
I think they want whatever they can get.
Yes.
I think at this point they want as much money as they can have, as much time off as they can have, as much flexibility. I mean, what anybody would want going into a job negotiation. And they know they have a friend in the White House now, and that they're probably going to be able to get basically whatever it is that they want.
Yeah, holding the kids hostage, of course, in the process, especially when you see the increase in major depression, even suicide for young kids spiking all across the country in school districts that are shut down. You think the unions might move a little faster, but no, of course, this is why public sector unions are such a scourge. But anyway, I also want to ask you about double masking, rather, which double lockdown is another thing. So, David, you and I have been talking a lot about New York specifically and the lockdowns here. I've also been a pretty big critic of just the inability to even have an adult conversation about, at a minimum, the limitations of masking. Now, all of a sudden, we're told it's February. We've been in this pandemic for 12 months, give or take. And now they're telling us that, it really had to be 2 masks all along. What do you make of this? Because I said that they were going to do this in October, publicly. There's a written record of it.
No, I
remember. They're going to tell you 2 masks.
I remember. I mean, why not 5 masks? Right? Like,
clearly better than 2.
Like, why not spacesuits? I don't know. Like, there's a degree of perfect safety that some people want to try to reach that's not only impossible, but sort of deeply unhealthy. I think part of the problem here is that Americans have been masking. I mean, I travel all over the country. I just got back from Texas, which is pretty open. But people were wearing masks according to the CDC guidelines, and it hasn't had the effect that it was supposed to. So why not 2 masks? I mean, if you're clutching at straws, why not clutch at 2?
All right, this is the fundamental lie here is that we're always told that, oh no, it has worked because it would have been so much worse if we hadn't done the things they told us to do, whether it's about lockdowns or masking. I just think that that's delusional at this point. When you see what's happened in California, when you see what's happened in New York, all-time record cases with months and months of preparation, everyone with all the PPE they could ever want, all these different rules and regulations in place. If this is what success looks like from lockdowns, David, I'd want to know, what does failure look like?
I mean, I would too. And clearly, one thing that's not being talked about nearly enough is that people are frustrated with the rate at which the vaccines are going out. And I'm frustrated too. But they're frustrated from the perspective of they think that 70% of people need to get this vaccination. The fact of the matter is, in places like New York City, 50 or 60% of people have already had this thing.
Yes.
Right? So really, when you're talking about herd immunity, it's either the vaccination or you've had it. And so you're absolutely right. I mean, we're reaching points even without the vaccine where in most places we're getting very close to 50% of people who now just have a natural immunity to it. So yeah, I don't honestly know how much worse it would have been if we hadn't switched over to masks in April. you
have to look at you look at the case numbers and you see the records that we've set, and also just how this has happened in, remember back when you and I first started talking about the New York example around the April-May timeframe. They're always pointing to Germany, the UK, all these European countries. They said, well, they have better social cohesion and they believe in the state more. And so, no, actually, those countries were, about half of them were worse than America, half of them were better than America when it came to COVID. Had nothing to do with the compliance with state mandates. I mean, you look at Belgium. Belgium was like a COVID war zone.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And look, there's pros and cons to each approach, right? Like, why has New York been much lower and much steadier than most other states over the past several months? in large part, it's because we got hit so hard in the beginning.
Yep.
And we did get a lot of natural immunity right off the bat. Whereas these places like California that were very, very slowly allowing, a case here, a case there, eventually you get an explosion. So, you have to balance these things, and there's no perfect choice. Like, all of the choices are not great. And I think we can at least say places like Florida and Texas probably made better choices.
When's your lockdown book
than
coming
places
out?
like New York and California?
When's your lockdown
It was
book
supposed to
coming
be March, but it's pushed back a little bit now because we thought this would be over. So probably April, probably mid to late April now.
We'll mark this one down because my predictions on this have been unfortunately very correct. I predicted the second lockdown in New York back in May. That happened. I predicted double masking in October. That has happened. Fauci is going to want us to wear masks. I will be talking to you in January of 2022, and he will still be making the case for us to be wearing masks in some situations.
I would not be the least bit surprised.
That's what I'm thinking. But David, good luck to you, man. Thanks for joining us from the Federalist, and we'll have you back on to talk about your book when it's out.
Thanks for having me, man.
It's almost time for a rapid-fire look at some of the stories we haven't yet been able to dive into, but we got to. Quick hits up next. Got to be prepared for the unknown these days when it comes to our economy. Who knows what the future holds? Trillions of dollars of spending, a massive national debt that's just getting bigger all the time, a lot of Fed QE nonsense going on. What do you think the future holds? You certain about that? The world is anything but predictable these days, and we could all benefit from something reliable right about now. Well, what could be more reliable than real gold and silver? I'm talking about real gold and silver you can actually hold right in your hands. Call the Oxford Gold Group now and learn how easy it is to get real gold and silver sent securely directly to your home, or how you can have real gold and silver placed in your IRA or 401k. Just call the Oxford Gold Group at 833-600-GOLD and ask for your free guide on owning gold and silver. Again, call the Oxford Gold Group right now at 833-600-GOLD. The Oxford Gold Group is the only gold company I trust. Call them right now, 833-600-GOLD. One more time, that's 833-600-GOLD. Mavericks owner Mark Cuban says his team will not be playing the national anthem, and a hospital in England bans what it calls gendered language. We got those stories and more in tonight's Quick Hits. Let's go with billionaire Mark Cuban first. Mark Cuban had said, he's perhaps best known for being the guy from Shark Tank, but also the owner of the NBA franchise, the Mavericks, that they would not play the national anthem before Mavericks games. Well, guess what? The NBA, since then, that was, I guess, yesterday, has responded with the following. NBA Communications. This is from Chief Communications Officer Mike Bass. He says, with NBA teams now in the process of welcoming fans back into their arenas, all teams will play the national anthem in keeping with long-standing league policy. Uh-oh! Could have a showdown with Mr. Cuban here on whether or not his particular team at its home games will play the national anthem. But isn't it interesting that you have more professional teams now that really are leaning toward showing that patriotism is kind of icky to them, or shows of patriotism are icky. You know, putting like police officer pigs on your socks, that's really cool. That gets you on a Wheaties box and elevates your career. You know, that's denigrating police, of course. But patriotism? No. A country that pays people to play a kid's game tens of millions of dollars a year if they happen to be genetically gifted enough that that's something that they can do is a terrible place, apparently, that should not be celebrated. Okay. Well, I guess that's one way to go. And Twitter CFO Ned Siegel had some interesting things to say about Donald Trump. Because here's the thing. Donald Trump, we don't know if he will technically be able to run yet for president again because the Senate trial is not yet over, but it's looking like, I mean, the chances are he's going to be able to run again if he wants to. Ned Siegel said this about whether Trump, if he came back to run, would be allowed on the Twitter platform.
Former President Trump was banned. If he came back, ran for office again, and was elected president, would you allow him back on the platform?
So the way our policies work, when you're removed from the platform, you're removed from the platform, whether you're a commentator, you're a CFO, or you are a former or current public official. And so remember, our policies are designed to make sure that people are not inciting violence, And if anybody does that, we have to remove them from the service, and our policies don't allow people to come back.
Gone forever. Trump is banned forever. That's what he's telling you. Trump is never allowed to come back on Twitter, even if he runs for president again. Isn't that interesting? We're going to have to take this up with legislation. I wish Trump, when he was president and when the Republicans had a majority in the House and the Senate, had done something about the social media companies. A lot of talk, not a lot of action. But there's that. UC Berkeley. It's a very left-wing place, kind of disconnected from reality in a lot of ways. They have dorms in full-on lockdown, like Wuhan, China style. You cannot leave your apartment, your home, except in the most extreme circumstances. It's police officers are monitoring dormitory halls, frequent inspections of student ID cards, and a ban on solitary outdoor exercise. These are among the measures being implemented in a dorm lockdown as UC Berkeley continues to grapple with a spike of COVID-19 cases on campus. So, yeah, that's right. You are not allowed to exercise alone outside. UC Berkeley, to protect its students from COVID-19, won't let them go for walks in the woods alone because of COVID. How much dumber are we all going to get? How much more bleating can all the sheep do together before we realize that this is just all panic now? Even as cases are going down, cases are going down something like 15, 20% in recent weeks. Hospitalizations are going down. Deaths are going down. It's all heading in the right direction, actually, because we're getting through the winter. We're almost in the middle of February here, so we all knew this was going to happen. But just as things are starting to turn the corner with the virus, not because of our amazing mitigation measures, by the way, that's a whole other conversation, now they're getting even crazier. In fact, there's a news story today. They might even consider some domestic travel restrictions as a means of trying to control the new variants. Oh, now there's new COVID out there. Remember, there was long COVID, which means you have it forever and you have all these symptoms, but they've actually haven't been able to prove that's a thing. Now there's new COVID, which is variants of this that they say are more contagious, but as far as we know, still have the same effect on the body, still same fatality rate, still being knocked out by the vaccine, from what we know so far, but they're getting crazier and crazier about this. Something I just want to share with you. If you're going to drink maple syrup or eat maple syrup, whatever, I guess we eat it, but it's a liquid, right? But if you're going to ingest maple syrup, do the real thing. That'll save you from having to even care about this situation. But as you know, there was a flavored syrup company known as Aunt Jemima, flavored maple syrup. It's not the real stuff that comes out of a tree. It's artificial. They've changed their name now to the Pearl Milling Company. What do we make of that? I don't know. I've never heard of pearl milling before, but this is what we've got now. You got all these corporations and companies. The moment they think there's any kind of a stereotype or any kind of a history that they view as problematic, we see this with the professional sports teams' names, and now they've changed this to the Pearl Milling Company. Look, if you like Pearl Milling Company syrup, God bless, but I actually like the maple syrup personally. Like the stuff that actually comes from a tree. It's worth it. A little more expensive, I know, but come on. That's it for tonight's Hold the Line. The No Spin News with Mr. Bill O'Reilly is up next. Shields high.